about what we're asking for. Uh-oh. Get on the same page. Well, my understanding, everybody was on the same page, right? Oh, that's right. We found out that there was a fracture the other day, and then they tried to clean up that mess.
That phrase right there, get on the same page about what we're asking for, should make every WNBA fan nervous, because we're 2 months from training camp, and the Players Union just held an emergency call on Sunday to figure out what they actually want. Not to negotiate with the league, to negotiate with themselves. So let's break down what's really happening in these CBA talks, because the public story and the private reality are two very different things.
It was like they went from a $5 million salary cap, I believe, to 5.65, something like that. Breanna Stewart said, quote, "There were some minimum standard requirements that did come into play, and that was important," Stewart added, "because that means the league heard us on some things that matter to us." Okay, so it looks like there may be some concessions happening here. Nope.
Here's what the league put on the table in their latest proposal, which arrived Friday after 6 weeks of silence. Housing standards got upgraded, meaning every player on a minimum salary gets a 1-bedroom apartment for the first 3 years of the new CBA. Developmental players get studios, facility standards improved. These were described as minimum standard requirements by Breanna Stewart herself, and she acknowledged the league heard them on issues that matter. But notice what's missing from that list. Money. Stewart said the proposal didn't move much money. The league went from a $5 million salary cap to $5.65 million. That's a 13% bump when the players are asking for more than double that.
Notably, the league's latest proposal offered concessions, there we go, on player housing and facility standards. So, okay, the owners have moved here. First-year players and players on minimum salary would be provided a 1-bedroom apartment for the first 3 years of the CBA, while developmental players would be provided a studio apartment. A source familiar with negotiations confirmed to CBS Sports.
Now let's talk about what the league actually offered back in early December, because these numbers matter. The WNBA proposed a $5 million cap with a max salary around $1.3 million in year 1, scaling up to almost $2 million by the end of the deal. Multiple players per team would be eligible for that max. The minimum salary would start at $230,000. The average salary would hit $530,000. And here's the kicker. According to sources close to the negotiations, this deal would give players approximately 70% of net revenue, not gross revenue. Net revenue. That's the money left after the league deducts specified operating expenses.
And that multiple players on each team would be eligible for the max salary. The minimum salary in the deal would start at $230,000 and the average salary at $530,000. All of the above salary figures included a base salary plus a revenue sharing component that includes both team and league revenue, something players have been asking for. The source estimates this deal would result in players getting about 70% of net revenue. That is the revenue remaining when the league's specified operating expenses are removed from the pot.
That distinction is everything, because what the Players Union wants is gross revenue sharing. They're asking for a $10.5 million salary cap with max salaries around $2.5 million. That's exactly double what the league offered. And the fundamental disagreement isn't about housing or travel or facility standards anymore. It's about whether players get paid from gross revenue like NBA players do, or net revenue after expenses are deducted. Think about what 70% of net revenue actually means. The league gets to decide what counts as an operating expense first. Marketing costs, operating expense, expansion fees, operating expense, new team setup costs, operating expense, all of that comes out before the players see their 70%. Meanwhile, NBA players get roughly 50% of gross revenue with no deductions. They get paid before expenses, not after.
Which is the one thing they don't seem to want to back off on. And we know now, so many fans, hey, now that we've seen the gargantuan salary bump for players in a league where the league's never turned a profit, well, now it's become a public relations issue between the players and the fans, because the fans can see what is on the table now. And we know, I said the other day, there's no way the NBA/WNBA owners didn't leak all that information the other day.
And now we arrive at the real issue, the one that's going to determine whether there's a season this year. Breanna Stewart said time is of the essence and admitted she doesn't know if there's a drop-dead date where the season can't start on time. But then she added this, "I think that both sides are very aware that it's gone on way longer than it needed to. But hopefully we can really start to be hearing each other and they hear us on things that are non-negotiable." Non-negotiable. That's the word that should concern everyone. Because when you're 2 months from training camp and one side is still using the word non-negotiable, you're not close to a deal. You're at an impasse.
But if these players don't get a handle on this revenue sharing issue that they seem to be stuck on, well, I mean, is there going to be a season? I can tell you this, I'm sure the WNBA absolutely knows a drop dead date. They just haven't went public with it. They haven't put it out there.
Here's what makes this particularly complicated. The WNBA has never turned a profit in its 28-year history. That's not opinion. That's documented. Fact. The league has been subsidized by the NBA since 1997, and now, coming off the Caitlin Clark effect year, where ratings exploded and attendance shattered records, the players see an opportunity. They see sold-out arenas and 2.5 million viewers for playoff games, and they're thinking, this is our moment to get paid like we're worth. But the owners are looking at the same numbers and seeing something different. They see one generational talent driving unprecedented interest, and they're asking themselves, is this sustainable or is this a Caitlin Clark bubble? Because if you commit to a $10.5 million salary cap based on 2024 numbers, and then 2025 ratings drop 40% because casual fans only came for Clark, you've locked yourself into a financial disaster. The league knows there's a drop-dead date, they absolutely know it. They haven't made it public because that would give the players' union leverage. But internally, they've calculated exactly how much time they need for an expansion draft, free agency, training camp preparation, and schedule coordination. My guess? That date is sometime in late March or early April, which means they've got maybe 6 to 8 weeks to figure this out. And then there's this rumor that won't go away. Multiple sources have suggested the Players Union is considering a strike during NBA All-Star Weekend, which happens this coming weekend. The idea would be WNBA players making a public statement during the NBA's showcase event, forcing the issue into the spotlight when maximum eyeballs are watching. If they do that, it's a catastrophic miscalculation. Because the court of public opinion has already shifted. Ever since ESPN published the details of the league's offer last week. And make no mistake, the league absolutely leaked that information intentionally. Fans have been able to see exactly what's on the table. And the reaction has been brutal for the Players Union. Go read the comments on any WNBA CBA story right now. You'll see the same sentiment over and over. $230,000 minimum salary for a league that's never made money, that's generous. They want NBA money, but they don't generate NBA revenue. If they strike, just cancel the season and see how they like $0. That's the public relations battle the Players Union is losing. Because once the specific numbers became public, the narrative changed. It's no longer about whether WNBA players deserve more money. Everyone agrees they do. It's about whether they deserve NBA-level revenue sharing when they're not generating NBA-level revenue. And most fans are siding with the league on that question. Here's what the Players Union seems to be missing. The average American worker made $59,000 in 2024. You're asking those fans, the ones who buy tickets and jerseys and league pass subscriptions, to sympathize with athletes turning down a $230,000 minimum salary because they want $300,000 instead. That's a tough sell. especially when the league has never been profitable and is only viable because NBA owners are willing to subsidize it. The housing concessions matter here too. The league agreed to provide one-bedroom apartments for all players on minimum salaries for the first 3 years of the new CBA. That's a real cost. That's the league saying we hear you on quality of life issues and we're willing to invest in making this a better experience. But if the players' union rejects this entire package because they can't get gross revenue sharing instead of net revenue sharing, they're going to lose the PR war completely. And that brings us back to that Sunday call, the one where the players' union executive committee had to get everyone on the same page about what we're asking for. Because here's what that really means. There's a fracture in the union. Not all players agree on whether to hold out for gross revenue sharing or accept the league's net revenue offer. Think about who's on opposite sides of that divide. You've got max salary players like Breanna Stewart and A'ja Wilson who are leaving millions on the table under the current system. They have the financial cushion to hold out, they have endorsement deals. They can play overseas if they need to. For them, this is about setting a precedent for the next generation and finally getting compensated relative to their value. But then you've got players on minimum salaries and developmental contracts who are looking at a $230,000 minimum and thinking that's life-changing money compared to what they're making now. They don't have the same leverage. They can't afford to miss paychecks. And they're probably asking themselves, is it worth risking this entire offer to fight for a revenue-sharing model that might not even be economically viable? That's the fracture. And the fact that the executive committee needed an emergency call to get on the same page tells you the fracture is real and it's significant. Because in a functional union, everyone already knows what they're asking for. You don't need emergency alignment calls 2 months before training camp unless there's internal disagreement about strategy. The league knows this, that's why they leaked the offer details to ESPN. They're trying to widen that fracture by showing players and fans exactly what's being turned down. It's a negotiating tactic, and it's working. Because now you've got fans pressuring players to take the deal, and you've probably got some players privately wondering if their union leadership is overplaying their hand. Here's the other factor nobody's talking about: expansion. The WNBA is adding teams in Golden State and Toronto, which means an expansion draft needs to happen. Free agency needs to happen. These are complicated logistical processes that require weeks of preparation. Every day without a CBA is a day closer to either delaying the season or rushing through these processes in a way that creates chaos. And chaos benefits nobody. Not the league, not the players, not the fans, and definitely not the new expansion teams who are trying to build competitive rosters from scratch. Golden State and Toronto didn't pay expansion fees to inherit a mess. They paid for the right to enter a functional league with established systems. If the CBA impasse forces a rushed expansion draft or a shortened season, those franchises get screwed. So what happens next? One of 3 scenarios. First scenario, the players' union blinks. They accept something close to the league's current offer, maybe with minor improvements on the revenue-sharing formula, and we get a season that starts on time. Second scenario, the league blinks. They move significantly on revenue sharing, closer to the gross revenue model the players want, and we get a deal that way. Third scenario, nobody blinks, we blow past the drop-dead date, and the season gets delayed or canceled. Based on everything we've seen, scenario 1 seems most likely. The league has made concessions on housing and facilities. They've offered salary increases that would more than double what many players currently make. They've put 70% of net revenue on the table, which is a higher percentage than most professional sports leagues give their players. And they've watched public opinion shift in their favor as the details became public. The players' union is in a tough spot. They can hold out for gross revenue sharing and risk losing public support entirely, or they can accept a deal that's objectively generous compared to current salaries but doesn't match the NBA model they want. Neither option is perfect, but one option gets them paid and keeps the league growing, while the other option risks everything on a principle that most fans don't think applies to a league that's never made money. Breanna Stewart said the league needs to hear them on non-negotiable issues. But here's the reality. In a negotiation, nothing is truly non-negotiable unless you're willing to walk away from the table entirely. And if the players' union walks away from a deal that offers $230,000 minimums, 70% of net revenue, and guaranteed housing, they better be prepared for fans to walk away too. Because at some point, this stops being about fair compensation and starts being about unrealistic expectations. And once fans decide you're being unrealistic, you've lost the leverage you thought you had. The league knows this. The question is whether the players' union knows it too, or whether they're about to find out the hard way. So here's what I want to know. If you're a WNBA player right now, are you voting to accept this deal or hold out for more? Because that's the choice they're facing. A guaranteed massive raise with net revenue sharing, or a gamble on gross revenue sharing that might cost them the entire season. Tell me what you do in the comments, because this decision is going to define the league's future for the next decade.